All right, what's going on there, fellas? Welcome back to the channel. Today I am joined by 80-20 beef patty over here. And I texted Paris. I was like, hey, Paris, rest day. We don't have a road to 600 video. Nothing my client sent me today in terms of questions was like ringing a bell. So I just went with the old text Paris and tell him to pick a video. And Paris has picked my top 5 exercises to get your back yoked. And I thought it would be interesting to have Kirsten join me for this one because I've always considered myself a bit of a general strength enthusiast. That's really what gets me excited about training, is this idea of general strength training. And hypertrophy is a massive part of that, so I know a thing or two about a thing or two. But I would call myself a strength enthusiast. And I would say my brother Max is very much a powerlifting enthusiast. And Kirsten here is the one bodybuilder in the household, the one person that likes coming in and getting on a pump and getting jacked. I'll throw some pictures of Kirsten because she has managed to put on some pretty serious muscle and is learning more and more about bodybuilding by the day. Eventually, I like to think that she'll be the bodybuilding resource here on the channel. So we figured we would kind of foray into that today. Okay, so all of that being said, my list is going to be through the lens of a strength enthusiast. I do think that if you push your volume metrics, you go through your hypertrophy phases and you log a lot of volume on the motions that I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a pretty jacked back as a byproduct. It's very rare to see someone who has an outstandingly strong back that doesn't look pretty goddamn impressive, but it might not be the most efficient road to get there. So if you're someone who, what gets you excited to go to the gym is the potential improvements in your performance metrics, and you want to be jacked almost as a side effect because that's your motivation system, maybe you want to listen to me a little bit more. Kirsten's is going to be a little bit more, the goal is to get jacked the quickest and most efficient way possible. So my first exercise, we're going to kind of go from the bottom up, because if we don't have solid lower back strength, we don't have developed erectors, it might be a little bit hard to express strong upper back strength in a whole lot of real world settings where we might be calling upon our strength. And if we're talking about developing strength in the lower back, we're talking about deadlifting. Now, that being said, it does not need to be any specific type of deadlift. You're going to have a strong back if you get strong at stiff legs, if you get strong at pulls from the floor, pulls from a slightly elevated height, pulls from a deficit, RDLs, just some kind of, if it's got deadlift in the exercise name, it'll probably work for getting you a real strong lower back. Now, which one we pick might depend on what sports we compete in. It might depend on what exercises we think are our cool measures of strength. That might be a conventional deadlift, it might be a sumo deadlift, but some kind of deadlift is kind of the cornerstone from which we're building the lower back strength up. Things like odd objects in strongman are great, sandbags, something like a stone. All of these things are phenomenal developmental tools, but deadlifting is kind of the bread and butter of having a wicked strong lower back. And I would say the strongest deadlifters are generally the guys with the strongest lower backs out there, and we can learn a thing or two from that. We can always use some back extensions to run up some extra volume, but I don't think they would replace some kind of heavy hinging for having a gnarly strong lower back. What would your number one pick be?
I have a whiteboard down there, so I'm looking over there. That's why I picked back extensions, but more weightlifter style. So not the ones where you kind of hunch over and bias more so the glutes, but the ones where you're kind of more arched. Is that safe to say?
Definitely more extended position.
Yeah. I like those.
Yeah, just because you can run up a ton of volume on them and get strong and jack it.
Absolutely. And you can overload them.
True. Let me catch the angle on you real quick. For my number 2 pick, it's going to be a little bit of an oddball, right? Because these are not in any particular order. We're just saying, hey, the aliens have abducted you, and they say in your exercise training routine, you can only pick 5 exercises to best replicate your current results and push them forward. For some reason, we're restricted to 5. What would those 5 be? Don't really care about the order of the 5 necessarily. So my second one is going to be a bit of an oddball pick, and that is going to be front squats. I find that if we're talking about building a strong back in terms of that back translated into carrying stuff, that back translating to picking stuff up, throwing stuff over your head, I find that front squats are very much worth their salt because they're hitting the erectors that are a little bit higher up in your back in a way that doesn't seem to get adequately stimulated from deadlifting and rowing. They develop a part of your back that I think translates to a lot of tasks, especially if we're talking about carrying things in front of us, putting heavy objects over our head, getting really good at dealing with a weight, trying to fold us forward. SSB could work as well, but I really like front squats for this because they have built up a part of my erectors. They've kind of changed my posture a good bit, and they have made me a hell of a lot more prepared to drop into a random strongman show like I did and feel like I can deal with heavy weights in front of my body, which is one of the most important things you can ask of back strength. Now, what is your number 2 pick gonna be?
I'm trying to pick ones that kind of align with yours a little bit. I'm gonna go with the T-bar row, any sort of T-bar row. I really like these. I find them really easy to connect with.
Specifically, she likes T-bar row machines.
Yeah.
Bar in the corner, T-bar row, often we kind of get some restriction in range of motion, but you had that hammer strength one that you really, really liked. It was not a chest supported one, it was a free weight one. I know Foad Abiad's massive on those. He cites those as like his number 1 thing in the world.
I miss that machine. And then alternatives.
If you don't have it.
If you don't have it, or like a cable row, or even I've been doing them on the belt squat. Kind of makes it a nice angle because the belt squat we have at the gym is not a straight up and down belt squat. It kind of pulls you forward a little bit, and that makes it really nice. The strength curve feels really nice on the back.
Yeah, Paris actually texted me this morning that he's been really digging the rows on the belt squat. So if you have access, bit of a niche piece of equipment, which the kind of the alternatives Kirsten's giving you are supposed to be more common piece of equipment, but there's a niche one. If you got it, it's worth a try. There's nothing magical about it. It's not going to fundamentally change the exercise. If you weren't getting gains from a regular row on a cable machine, you're probably not going to magically start making them, but it feels really nice, and it could be a little change in your training.
And honorable mention to T-bar rows with a chest support. I also love those, but
they couldn't make it into the 5.
They couldn't make it in the top.
All right, and my third pick for getting a unbelievably strong and yoked back, my third pick would be any kind of free weight horizontal row without a chest support. So that might be a dumbbell row with a single arm, might be a bilateral dumbbell row, might be a barbell row, whatever other implement you could row, right? But something where we're demanding our core to stay tight, practice our breathing and bracing for an extended amount of time, kind of build that proprioceptive awareness, and put in that volume that's gonna develop our lats, our rhomboids, our rear traps, our rear delts, right? Gotta put in our volume in a horizontal pull, right? What kind of back program doesn't have a horizontal pulling motion? I think you'd be big time missing out. I like that there's an anti-rotational aspect that really develops your obliques. If we do a single arm dumbbell row, we can really dig into the lats on those and bias towards the lats, or we can bias towards the upper back, depending on where we're pulling. I also like that we can kind of get stronger in holding our deadlift positions for time, keep those knees driven out, keep those hips back, keeping the spine neutral, keeping a tight brace with the barbell row. I think both of them work great, and it's largely something you can rotate between with time. But my third pick for getting a monstrous back is going to be some kind of free weight rowing motion. From a bodybuilding perspective, you could probably get damn jacked doing the chest supported motion where maybe you could handle just a bit more volume. But in terms of then turning around and applying that mass and that strength to settings outside of that exercise, I like having something where we have to build that awareness of our midsection. What would your third be, milady?
Another machine that got away, the hammer strength single arm row with the chest support. I love that machine. We again don't have it at the gym here or in our garage, obviously. So I would say a good alternative to that would be a dumbbell, like a single arm dumbbell row. But that's another exercise that I think is really easy to connect with. And
yeah,
I like
on
that.
Those, you'll see a lot of guys will put the seat pretty high up. They'll put their hand on the seat, and they're really focused on, don't knock it over. They're really focused on pulling low and digging that elbow deep relative to the rib cage. So the hand is just a hook, the forearm is a rope, and really, buddy boy, really the exercise is just moving the elbow from a reach to digging it as deep relative to the rib cage as possible, over and over and over, getting that full stretch, getting the full contraction, and just putting in volume with solid weights. All right, and for our fourth one, we wrote our lists independently. You are a menace. Come here. We wrote our lists independently only to find out that our final 2 exercises are the same. So I guess we're kind of doing these last 2 in tandem. The 4th exercise, I'm sure you guys can guess it. If we're trying to get a big, strong back, what would the program be without pull-ups?
Number 1.
Yeah. This is Kirsten's number 1 back builder.
Yes.
Like it's the foundation from which she's built her back up. And I would say that they are definitely a staple if the goal is that back strength as well. I find that there's something, we used to talk about like closed chain, open chain, something where you're moving your body through space, and that's what makes these exercises uniquely beneficial. And a pull down could never disrupt the body as much as a pull up. And when we started to get into the reasons as to why, a lot of this stuff kind of fell apart. But there was a lot of guys who spent a lot of time in the gym and they just swore by it. They're like, okay, maybe I don't have a great explanation mechanistically, but I do find that I have gotten a lot stronger, or I've gotten a lot more sore, I've disrupted homeostasis a lot more with these exercises where we're moving our body through space. The bigger compound, the more like heavy duty exercises, so to speak. And just anecdotally, that has been my personal experience. I know people who've had the opposite experience where they did lots of pull-ups and their back sucked, and it wasn't until they moved to more like fluffy bitch exercises, quote unquote, right? Because if you go hard, any exercise can be hard, right? When people say leg pressing is easy, it's a self-report that they just don't work hard on the leg press, because I think the leg press is disgustingly hard. But they moved over to more isolated exercises like the single arms and whatnot. And they saw a lot of progress. My experience was the reverse. I did a lot of these more good mind-muscle connection pull-downs.
We did a lot of pull-downs.
We did a lot of volume on pull-downs and chest-supported rows with good mind-muscle connection. And it wasn't until we moved to these a little bit more heavy-duty exercises that we really started to see a lot of growth. And that was very much the case with my back. And there's a good reason that so many strength athletes have sworn by, hey, this isn't something I compete in, but pull-ups are something that I keep in my routine year-round. We're not limited by our low back, so we can put in a ton of volume. They're quite challenging on the biceps, which some people view as a downside. I view that as an upside, right? If we're going to have to, again, we're expressing this back strength in real life. If we're carrying something in front of us, our biceps are also part of that task, right? So having sufficient bicep strength to where they're not getting in the way of expressing your back strength is part of having the strong back in some way. And I really find that if you're wicked strong on weighted neutral chin-ups, you're wicked strong on weighted pull-ups, usually the biceps are strong enough to put them in a real world scenario and haul some shit around. So they've been a pretty good staple for me. And I definitely swear by that small change making a big difference in my training. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say also doing like banded pull-ups or assisted pull-ups is still super useful, even though I'm someone who can do pull-ups into
eight of them.
Yeah, into the hypertrophy rep range. I still like doing it. The assisted pull-ups still hit different than a lat pull-down for me, and I'm sure at some point I'll be less of a lat pull-down hater, but just doing some variation of a pull-up just feels so much more disruptive, and it's hard to choose a lat pull-down over that for me.
If you have an assisted pull-up machine, unless you are wicked strong, you should probably be using it.
It goes hard.
Yeah, when I was lighter, I got to the point where I was like doing like 25 to 30 pretty goddamn strict pull-ups in a row. And it was like, okay, there's probably not a scenario in my training where I'm going to use the assisted machine. If you're anything shy of being able to bang out 20 really good ones, you're going to be in a fatigued state. To preserve our good range of motion, to preserve that pull into the collarbone, there's going to be times where we're putting in volume with an assist, and that is A-okay. Don't feel you're embarrassed by being on it. You're missing out. I missed out because when I first got up to 220, 230, I was no longer able to do my sets of 30 on pull-ups. And there were times and places where to get my last 2 working sets of 12 to 15 reps, I could get it kind of funkily with regular pull-ups, or I could have done it with a lot better technique with an assist. And I should have used the assist. So learn from my mistakes. That thing's your best friend.
Yeah, use it as a back off set.
True. All right, and then our fifth and final exercise for both Kirsten and I, you might notice you're like, okay, lower back's hit pretty well. If you're me, you care about that mid-erector kind of area, that's hit. A lot of people would argue that that's maybe not the most important thing in the world. I swear by that shit, whether it's the SSB or the front squat. I think that stuff matters. We've done some kind of horizontal pull. Some people would say, well, maybe we should do 2 horizontal pulls in our top 5, 1 bilateral, 1 unilateral, and then a vertical pull. That caps out our 5. I kind of use the unilateral and the bilateral interchangeably. They do offer unique stimuluses for sure, but you could argue, okay, maybe there's nothing that's really directed towards the upper back, truly kind of focusing more on those rear traps, rear delts area, right? Something like a rear delt fly, something like a Powell raise, something where we are truly shifting our emphasis away, where the lats are not going to be part of this exercise, and that other smaller upper back musculature is going to be what we take to failure. Both Kirsten and I followed this thought process to a T, and we came to the same exercise, which that's probably my method's kind of bleeding over a little bit. I don't think they were completely independently arrived at, but that's going to be face pulls. Like I said, there's a lot of exercise you could throw here with great results. Tons of different rear delt accessories that are going to do a great job. IYT raises are a killer exercise for this spot. There's a lot of things you could do here. You could plug your favorite down in the comments if you feel like we missed it. But I've always liked the face pulls. Just getting a trap pump or rear delt pump, building up that external rotation, because our pec, and more specifically what we were talking about today, our lat, are secondary internal rotators of the shoulder. So we're getting wicked strong at turning our shoulder in. It's nice to even something out and challenge that external rotation a little bit. Our shoulders aren't going to disintegrate if we don't do it, but I tend to find that when people are a little stronger with their external rotation than completely untrained, the shoulders tend to feel a little bit more healthy. Plug in loads of volume, keeps you healthy. And one of the things that your back does that's very underrated is if we're putting a heavy object over our head, we need a tremendous amount of upper back strength. And this can be one of our staples for developing that. Do you have any thoughts, Mrs. Bodybuilder?
No, I just think it's a good, as someone who doesn't do exclusively bodybuilding, it's kind of nice 2 birds, 1 stone type exercise for like shoulder health and all that jazz. But you do need shoulder health for a purely hypertrophy reason as well. So
true. Now, one of these days, Kirsten is going to do a dedicated focus on bodybuilding for a bit, and I think it's going to get freaky. Kirsten, this is my personal belief. Maybe I'm biased because she is my girlfriend, but I think Kirsten is more responsive to lifting weights and hypertrophy than any natty woman I have ever talked to. Because she started going to the gym, eating 1 meal a day, which was usually onion rings.
And a hot dog.
Maybe a hot dog. Mostly onion rings once a day. Starts doing face pull, gets traps out of nowhere. Decides she's going to start doing a different exercise. Her shoulders blow up. Every time she has selected a exercise that works a muscle, really crazy response. So I've always thought, I'm like, what if that was her sole focus and her training volume was like distributed in the way a bodybuilder might? Is she just going to be Big Ramy 3.0? We will find out.